What if a camera could record tomorrow? Before tomorrow even existed. Sounds impossible, until one forgotten camera predicted a murder 24 hours before it happened. And the victim was the man holding the camera. This is the story of the camera that recorded tomorrow. Ethan Carter had spent years investigating mysteries that no one else believed. One stormy evening, a small package arrived at his apartment. There was no sender, no return address. Inside, he found an old brass key and a handwritten note. Said only 5 words. The truth is waiting below. Beneath the note, there was an address. It pointed to a police evidence warehouse, abandoned nearly 20 years ago. The address led Ethan to the edge of the city, where an enormous abandoned police evidence warehouse stood in complete silence. Every window was broken. Rust covered the giant steel doors. Nature had slowly swallowed the building. Ethan unlocked the entrance with the old brass key. The heavy metal door groaned as it slowly opened. Cold air rushed out from inside, as if the building had been holding its breath for 20 years. Deep inside the darkness, a faint red light flickered for just a second. Then, it disappeared. Ethan followed the strange clicking sound deeper into the warehouse. Every step echoed through the endless darkness. Dust floated through the cold air. Suddenly, he reached a forgotten evidence room. Hundreds of old cameras were stacked on broken shelves. Most of them were covered in dust. But one camera looked completely clean, as if someone had touched it only moments ago. A small red recording light was blinking. Ethan slowly picked it up. The camera was already recording, even though there was no battery inside. Ethan hesitated for a moment. Then, he pressed play. The screen flickered to life. The recording began with a date displayed in the corner. Tomorrow's date. Ethan frowned. Someone was running through an empty subway station. The camera followed every desperate step. Suddenly, a loud gunshot echoed through the tunnel. The man collapsed onto the platform. His face was hidden in the shadows. As the camera moved closer, Ethan's blood froze. The victim was Ethan Carter. Ethan refused to believe what he had just seen. There had to be a logical explanation. He paused the recording and carefully watched every frame again. Suddenly, his eyes stopped on something in the background. A digital clock hanging inside the subway station. 8:47 p.m. He quickly looked at his watch. It was only 7:12 p.m. The recording wasn't showing the past. It was showing the future. Ethan laughed nervously. "It's fake," he whispered. But before he could leave, his phone suddenly rang. An unknown number. The moment he answered, a terrified voice screamed, "Don't go to the subway tomorrow, or you'll die." The call ended instantly. Ethan's heart started racing. The camera screen showed someone standing directly behind him. He froze. Slowly, he turned around. There was no one. The warehouse was completely empty. Ethan looked back at the camera. The shadow was still there, standing only a few feet behind him. Then, the figure slowly raised its hand and pointed toward a locked evidence locker. Before Ethan could react, the shadow disappeared, but the locker door opened by itself. Ethan carefully picked up the evidence file. A thick layer of dust covered its surface. The seal had never been broken. With trembling hands, he slowly opened it. Inside were dozens of old documents, newspaper articles, police reports, witness statements. Then, a single photograph slipped onto the floor. Ethan picked it up. His face turned pale. The photo showed the exact subway station from the recording. Standing in the center of the platform was Ethan himself, wearing the same jacket, holding the same mysterious camera. But the photograph had one shocking detail. It was taken 20 years ago. Ethan slowly lifted the mysterious camera. The red recording light was blinking again. He looked at the screen. It wasn't showing the warehouse anymore. It was showing Ethan, walking toward the subway station. But Ethan hadn't left the warehouse. Confused, he kept watching. The recording showed him stopping at platform 3. Then, a hooded man stepped out of the darkness. He handed Ethan a small black envelope. Before Ethan could open it, the hooded man whispered, "Don't trust the camera." Suddenly, the recording ended. The screen went completely black. Ethan knew he had no choice. The next evening, he arrived at the deserted subway station. The clock read 8:43 p.m. for minutes before the time shown in the recording. Platform 3 was completely empty. The air felt strangely cold. Suddenly, footsteps echoed through the tunnel. A hooded man slowly walked out of the darkness. He stopped just a few feet away from Ethan. Without saying a word, he handed Ethan the same black envelope from the recording. Ethan quickly pulled back the hood. His heart nearly stopped. The man's face was exactly like Ethan's, only much older, with tired eyes, and a long scar across his face. The older Ethan looked at him, and quietly said, "You're making the same mistake I made." Ethan slowly picked up the black envelope. His hands were shaking. There was no name, no address, only one sentence written on the front, "Open after you meet yourself." He tore it open. Inside, there was a single photograph. Showed Ethan, standing in the same subway station. But he wasn't alone. Beside him, stood the hooded man. Both of them were holding the same mysterious camera. Ethan turned the photograph over. On the back, a handwritten message read, "Every time you try to escape, the camera creates another version of you." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He finally understood. The older man wasn't following him. He was one of the many Ethans who had already failed. Ethan slowly turned around. The footsteps grew louder. One, then two, then dozens. Shadows emerged from every corner of the station. One by one, they stepped into the light. Ethan couldn't breathe. Every single one of them had his face. Some were older. Some were badly injured. One had blood on his hands. Another wore a torn police uniform. One version carried the mysterious camera. Another held a broken camera covered in cracks. They all stared at Ethan, without saying a word. Finally, the oldest Ethan stepped forward. His voice was calm. "Welcome to the end of the loop." The oldest Ethan lowered the camera. His eyes were filled with regret. "You deserve the truth," he said. "This camera wasn't built. It was discovered. Decades ago, deep beneath an abandoned military research facility, workers uncovered a strange metal box buried underground. Inside was this camera. It had no brand, no serial number, no battery, yet it could record events before they happened. Scientists tried to destroy it. They failed. Police locked it away. They failed. Everyone who touched it became trapped inside the same endless loop. Then the oldest Ethan looked directly at him. The camera never chooses victims. It chooses the one who refuses to let go of the truth. The countdown had already begun. 59, 58. Every second echoed through the empty subway station. Ethan grabbed the mysterious camera. He smashed it against the concrete floor. Once, twice, again and again. But the camera didn't even crack. The countdown continued. 30 seconds left. Suddenly, every alternate version of Ethan stepped forward. They all spoke together. "Destroying the camera changes nothing." The oldest Ethan looked directly into Ethan's eyes. Then he whispered, "The camera isn't the prison. You are." Ethan slowly turned around. The platform was completely silent. No footsteps, no shadows. Then, a child stepped out of the darkness. He looked no older than 10. He wore old-fashioned clothes covered in dust. In his hands, he held another mysterious camera. The child smiled. "I've been waiting for you," he said. Ethan stared in confusion. "Who are you?" The child's smile disappeared. He quietly replied, "I'm the first person who ever pressed play." Ethan felt the ground beneath him shake. The child raised the camera. Every version of Ethan around the platform suddenly disappeared. There was only silence. Then the child whispered, "Every loop begins with curiosity and ends with a choice." Ethan opened his eyes. He was no longer inside the subway station. He was back, inside the abandoned police evidence warehouse. The mysterious camera was gone. The countdown had disappeared. Everything looked normal. For a moment, Ethan believed it was all a nightmare. Then he noticed something on the wooden table. A fresh police evidence file. It hadn't been there before. Across the front, in bold black letters, it read, Case number 428. Ethan slowly opened the file. Inside was a single photograph. It showed an abandoned hospital corridor. At the end of the hallway, a dark figure was standing perfectly still. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "The next recording begins here." Ethan looked up. Somewhere inside the empty warehouse, a camera clicked. Recording, fade to black. Some mysteries never end. They only choose a new victim. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to Mind Maze. Episode 3 is coming soon.